Anyway, we're really happy to have Dr. David Wiley with us. He's the founder of the Open High School of Utah, opencontent.org, and is the senior advisor of Flat World Knowledge, which, by the way, is a textbook company that I use one of their textbooks. It's kind of interesting. Maybe he'll tell us a little about that before he gets through here. He's an associate professor of instructional psychology and technology in the David O. McKay School of Education at Brigham Young University. David also serves as associate director of the Center for the Improvement of Teacher Education and Schooling, with responsibility for the research unit where he directs the Open Education Group. Dr. Wiley has received many other honors and recognitions. Let me just mention a select few. He was recognized as number 78 on Fast Company's 100 Most Creative People in Business. Recipient of the National Science Foundation Career Grant, non-resident fellow, Center for Internet and Society at Stanford Law School. He's a visiting scholar for the Open University of the Netherlands. He's a design scientist for Edumetrics Research Institute. This is maybe the most impressive thing of all, and that is that Dr. Wiley's career is dedicated to increasing access to educational opportunities for everyone around the world. Let's give a warm Snow College welcome to Dr. Wiley.
Thank you. Wow, I'd like to meet that guy. When you say them all together, it sounds really cool. But yeah, well, I'm going to tell the story, I suppose. So first, I guess, thanks for the invitation. It's really fun to be here. It's my first time on your campus, and I was almost late getting down here, just walking around looking at how beautiful the campus is. It's kind of legendary up north about the cool things that are going on down here and what a great school and what a great campus it is, but I just never made the time to get down here. So thanks for the invitation. And I'm sorry Alan couldn't be here. Alan and I served a mission together in southern Japan years ago, and I was looking forward to seeing him, but you guys are in good hands if you get to work with Alan from time to time in this class context, in this seminar. So entrepreneurship. I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you to do is just find somebody next to you and just take 30 seconds and have a quick conversation about why you're even in this seminar. Why are you interested in entrepreneurship, or maybe even being an entrepreneur? Just take a second, turn to somebody near you and answer that question. And don't say because it was required. That's lame. Don't say that. I know it's coming. That's fine. Okay, time. So, what are some answers? What did you say, or what did your neighbor say that you thought was interesting or surprising? You want to be innovative? Okay. Anybody? You here for bonus points? Really, that's the real answer for extra credit? Why entrepreneurship? Why care about entrepreneurship? Okay, expand the possibilities of what you can do. Start your own business. With business, typically there's money involved. We're in yeah, we hope. We're in favor of money, okay? Learn business skills. Okay. So there's a lot of reasons to be interested in entrepreneurship. I think there are as many reasons as there are that people come to college. If we asked, why are you here, and you all gave your answers, they would all be pretty wide and different as well. For me, as hokey as it sounds, it's true, so I'm going to go through with saying it, but the reason I got involved in entrepreneurship was I wanted to change the world somehow. And my experience over and over again was that you can try to change the world, but if you don't have some kind of engine underneath the change you're trying to make that keeps the change going from day to day and week to week, and some way to pay the bills so the people who are changing the world can keep doing it instead of having to pay attention to something else, that your world changing will be very short-lived. You know, you might be able to get a grant from somebody and that might last for a year and help you do something really cool, but at the end of the 12 months, everybody packs up and goes home because the money's run out and they've got to pay their rent and they've got a family to feed. And so for me, entrepreneurship is really about finding ways to keep going, keep good work going, keep interesting things running after they get up and started. And that's a couple of the stories that I want to tell about some companies that I've been involved with is social entrepreneurship is a term that maybe Alan's talked about in this class. It's not just kind of straight entrepreneurship, but it's entrepreneurship with a specifically social goal. You know, a business that tries to make the world a better place. You might have heard, has he used the phrase double bottom line in here? Is that a phrase that's familiar to anybody? The idea of a double bottom line is that you don't just have a financial bottom line you have to meet, but as a company you have some kind of improvement you're trying to make in society, and when you look at whether your business is successful or not, you don't just look at the finances, you also look at your societal impact and whether you're creating the kind of change that you hope to create. That's the idea of double bottom line. And I think that for a lot of people, at least I know for me, like this idea that I'm going to get rich, that's just not enough to get me out of bed every day to work a 14-hour or 16-hour day or whatever it takes to try to make something happen. Money's great, but it's not that great. You know, but the idea that I'm getting out of bed to change the world every day, that gets me out of bed every day. And if we can make enough money along the way that we can all keep paying our rent and feeding our kids and stuff, then all the better. All the better. So the thing that I'm really super passionate about that was mentioned in the intro is I think education is vitally, vitally important to people, and is probably the single best thing that you can do in terms of improving your prospects for good life and good life for your family and good life for your children and their children. It's just so important. So I really value education, but I also think that a lot of times it's too hard to get. Even if you put yourself in a position where you can get it, it's too expensive to get. Sometimes it takes too long to get, and it might not be as relevant as you hope that it would be. So this thing called education that's so valuable that I really love and care about and want to help people get access to, a lot of people just can't afford access to it. So that's the kind of stuff that I work on, and so I want to tell a couple of stories along those lines. First, I want to share this quote by Tim O'Reilly. Tim O'Reilly is the founder of O'Reilly Publishing. That if you've ever done anything technical with computers, or you know the books that have the little line art of the animals on the front, those are all from O'Reilly Publishers. Tim was talking about piracy and about people's books getting copied and traded around on the internet, and somebody asked him how big a problem it was. And Tim said that in his mind, obscurity is a way bigger threat to an author than piracy is. You know, most authors write a book and nobody ever knows that you wrote a book. No matter how much noise you try to make about it, nobody ever finds out that your book exists. They never even read your book. And the idea that nobody ever finds your work is the reality for most authors, where piracy, this idea that somebody's going to be taking my work and somehow doing something with it. If your book is getting downloaded thousands of times off the internet, guess what? It means people are talking about your book, and people are talking about you and you as an author, and that there's some interest in you. So Tim, who runs a publishing company, said that even from his perspective, piracy isn't the big threat. Obscurity is the big threat. Nobody ever finds out about what you're writing and what you're doing. And in entrepreneurship, there's a tendency sometimes to, if you think you've got this great idea, to make sure that nobody else finds out about the idea for your business, because if they find out about it, maybe they'll take it. And they'll do your business instead of you, and you'll never be able to feed your family or do whatever it was that your goal was with your business. But I think Tim's quote here applies really strongly. And that's really the main thing I want to try to drive home. When I thought about what I could say to you that nobody else is probably going to say to you of all the people that Alan brings in on the seminar, What I want to say to you is share your ideas. Share the idea for your business with as many people as you can. Talk to as many people as you can about it. Get as much feedback as you can about it. Get as many other people thinking about it and talking to their friends about this great idea that you have. And you'll be surprised what will happen. So the first story I want to tell is about the Open High School of Utah. Anybody ever, by some odd chance, heard of the Open High School of Utah? I didn't expect. Oh, one person. Yes. Okay. The Open High School of Utah is, as the name implies, a high school in Utah. It's a charter school, so it's a publicly funded school, but it doesn't look exactly like a normal public school does. In the case of the Open High School, it's completely online. And the story behind the Open High School, and this is a great story. It's one of my favorite stories anyway. You may not think it's great. Anyway, I was sitting in my office one day and a student walked into my office. It was a PhD student that I was working with in education. And he said to me, "You're always talking about all these cool ideas about how you're going to change the world and this, that, and the other. And online learning is so important. And open and free curriculum materials are so important. And you're just all the time." He said, "I just saw that the state of Utah changed its rules around charter schools so that you can create completely online high schools now. And I think you need to either put your money where your mouth is or you need to shut up with all your fancy talk about how awesome the world would be if somebody would just do something." So this student basically double dog dared me into creating a school. And that's really the genesis of the Open High School. We sat down and we started thinking about if you were going to start a school that would be online, that would be public, that would take a lot of the innovative ideas that are floating around, what would that school look like? And particularly in my case, where I'm interested in affordability and accessibility, what would it look like if you based a school completely around open educational resources? Now, is there anybody that's ever heard this term, open educational resources, before? Will you take a shot at defining it for us? Like Wikipedia, right? Anybody can use it. It's available to everybody for free. People can edit it or make changes to it. That's the core idea of open educational resources. So with the Open High School, when we wrote the charter documents for the Open High, I've got it up here somewhere. When we wrote the charter documents for Open High School and applied with the state for permission to open it, one of the things we said in the charter documents was, we will never, ever adopt commercially created curriculum at the Open High School. All the materials we use in every course will all be open educational resources. They'll all be things that we found for free on the internet and that have been created and shared legally by somebody along the way. And the idea was that if you take these open materials, that saves money that we're not spending on curriculum, and we can take that money and redirect it into teaching and improving the quality of the student experience in some other ways. And I don't know what's scrolling by on the crawl here, but the school's in its 4th year now, and in the past, well, last year I think Secretary of Education Arne Duncan mentioned the Open High School by name 4 times, talking about innovative things that are going on that other people should look at. If you look at all the online high schools in the state at their CRT, at the state standardized test scores, you'll see that the Open High School is the top performing online high school in the state. And I think number 20-something, 28 overall for all the high schools in the state last year, even though we don't spend any money on commercial curriculum. And so with Open High School, you know, we wanted to prove, and in 2012 actually won, or in 2011, won the Best of State Award for Best Curriculum in the state. Even though our curriculum is 80% pulling together free material from the internet and 20% us going in and writing and creating our own to fill in those gaps where gaps exist. So, you know, that was a picture of Secretary Duncan there. Our science teacher was named, won some national award. Here it is. Amy Pace, who's a math science teacher there, won the Presidential Award for Excellence for online teaching. There's been just a ton of cool stuff that's happened there that started with this vision of we could do something better with the school. It could be more interesting. It could be online, and it could cost a lot less. And part of the way it could cost a lot less is using open source materials, using open educational resources. And if we could do it here in Utah, where the per pupil funding is so low relative to other states, if we could show a model here where by spending no money on curriculum, we could create really high quality learning experiences, then that same model can be picked up in other states and can be used over and over and over again. In fact, one of the things the Open High School does is all of the courses, after we find all those free materials and put them together and add our own materials into them, we then take that full course and put it online and make it free for anybody else to download or anybody else to read through or use. So, if you ever are looking for another perspective on your math class or another perspective on your algebra or your history class or whatever, there's a full set of online classes here, everything except the assessments. We can't share the assessments because then students will look at them before we give the test and blah, blah, blah. But all of the videos, all the activities, all the simulations, this is Math Essentials first quarter. All of our courses are online and they're completely free, and you or your teachers could come grab them and use them to start your own school or use them to teach a class here at Snow or whatever. And that's the whole idea. The whole idea is to use Open High School as a vehicle, primarily, of course, to teach students and make sure that they've got a great experience. But make that experience, model that experience in such a way that other people can take the model and implement it, and they don't have to come ask us, they don't have to ask our permission, they can just go. And they can drive it and make it as cool and affordable as they possibly can. And in a way, these open educational resources, because we're reusing things that other people have created, so we want other people to be able to use the stuff that we've created. And actually, maybe I'll stop there on that thought. I'm already rambling on longer than I thought I was going to. Before I leave the Open High School kind of example, any questions about Open High? I'm going to talk about Flat World next. Do we use Skype? The teachers do use Skype, but they only use Skype for one-on-one interactions with the students. So the pedagogical or the teaching model at Open High is that all this online curriculum, the videos and all the exercises and everything, is going to get you 80 or 90% of the way there. Some weeks it's going to get you 100% of the way there, but the person behind you would only get 70% of the way there. And because the teacher doesn't spend her whole day standing up and giving the same biology lecture 5 times during the day, the lecture, everything's already captured online. So she spends her whole day going through the data in the system and seeing who's logged in and who hasn't, and who failed the last test or who struggled with the homework, and getting on Skype or getting on the cell phone one-on-one with those students and just kind of helping them get caught back up or helping them understand the thing that they misunderstood. So all the teachers are full-time, but they don't have to spend any of their time teaching to a whole class. They can spend their time teaching students one-on-one, and they identify those students based on the data that come out of the online system. Does that make sense? Oh. So we've got about 400 students right now in the school. We open with 9th grade the first year, 9th and 10th grade the second year. We had a couple of students last year. I think we had like a dozen students that came to us in such a way that they were eligible to graduate at the end of last year. But this year is the first year that we'll have the full pipeline, of people who started 9th grade with us that will finish 12th grade with us. So I can't really say what the graduation rate is going to be like. But on measures like the state standardized test, the CRTs have this idea of whole school proficiency, which is your proficiency in science, math, and language arts kind of leveled out, and our numbers were like 75% last year. Other virtual schools were down in the low 50s. So there's definitely something interesting happening there, but graduation rates we won't be able to say anything about till next summer. Yeah. Thanks. Nice. Yeah, well, and I think it's true. Anybody that's teaching in a face-to-face setting, I think, are you familiar with this idea of the flipped classroom? that phrase is kind of getting popular now. And the idea is to take, well, the flip is basically to have students do lectures at home and have them do homework in class. That's the flip. So you take what your teacher does, the whole song and dance that you do in front of the room, and you record that, and that's what students do at home. They watch that recording, and they watch it, honestly, they watch it at 1.5 times speed or at 2 times speed, and they get through it. But the nice thing about it is when they miss something, they can stop and rewind it and listen to it a second time, listen to it a third time until they figure out what you're saying. And then you spend class time actually doing work. And when a student gets stuck on homework, instead of asking Mom, do you remember how to factor quadratics? And Mom says, I don't know that I ever knew how to factor quadratics. The teacher's there in the room, and you can spend your time having these interactions with students that are helping and supporting them in the learning, rather than doing a lot of broadcast like what I'm doing right now. So this idea of trying to flip things, I think that's one really interesting way to think about using technology. The second way to think about using technology is when you've got students going into these online environments, their interactions in those environments throw off a lot of data, kind of like exhaust coming out of a car. Like you don't drive a car in order to create exhaust, but it's a byproduct of it. And when students are interacting in these online environments, they're clicking on links, they're typing words into boxes, they're doing things that can be logged and captured. And every teacher wishes they knew for every single student in their class exactly what you're struggling with, exactly what you're getting, so that I can give you just exactly the help that you need. But when you stand here and you look at a group of 80 people, you can't do that. But if you could go into a dashboard and look at empirical data on what every student has done and hasn't done, they haven't watched it yet, or they did, or they failed the homework, or they didn't do the homework, and you can let your teaching be driven by data instead of having your teaching be driven by just kind of get a rough feeling of the energy in the room, it makes a huge difference. So those are the two things I'd suggest about that. Let me go on and talk about Flat World for a minute now. We got a little, that was prefaced a little bit in the introduction. Flat World is another story about sharing ideas. So how many of you have a blog? A weblog? We don't even call them weblogs anymore. It's so old school. So I would really encourage all of you to have some place. Facebook is okay, but you don't tend to see people write more than about this much in Facebook. But I know that there's sometimes when you're laying around at night, when you're standing there doing the dishes, or you're standing in the shower washing your hair, or whatever it is you're doing, when your mind is wandering places and you have ideas about how you could make the world a better place. You have an idea about some frustrating experience that you had at work, or some frustrating experience you had on campus, and man, if we just did that and that and that, we could make that better and make it easier for people. You need to have some place where you write those things down, and when you write them down, it should be some place that's public, that other people can find them. So when somebody has an idea like, I wonder if anybody's ever thought about fixing this problem, and they go to Google and type it in, they can find you, and they can find the stuff that you've been thinking and that you've been writing about. And the idea that somebody would find what you're thinking, what you've been writing about online may sound like there's zero chance of it happening, but I want to tell you 2 stories about that happening. So the first is with Flat World Knowledge. So Flat World is a commercial textbook publishing company. The 2 founders of Flat World used to work at Pearson, which is probably the biggest publisher of textbooks in the world. And they just got sick of hearing people talking about all the problems with textbooks, about how they're so expensive and how publishers play these games with putting access codes in the back, or packing these CDs in, or giving it a workbook, or something so you can't sell it back, you can never buy it used, and why does a textbook cost? Where was I? I was in Virginia a couple of weeks ago at a community college, and they were talking about the strategic consulting class they teach there. It has a $320 textbook. So there's just all kind. How many of you have when I say the word textbook? How many of you have feelings of great love and charity and human kindness when I say the word textbook? I mean, it just doesn't invoke that feeling in anybody. People hate textbooks. They hate publishers. So Jeff and Eric just got sick of being on the receiving end of all of this brutality, and they said, I think we can do this better. And so they quit Pearson and they started a company called Flat World, and they said, we want to make textbooks, but we want to make textbooks that are open educational resources. We want to make textbooks that I can go online and somebody can go into the catalog under, say, business and economics here, and into, I don't know, financial accounting, and I want there to be a big button right here that says, read this book online. And when I click that button, am I a professor or a student? Well, actually, I can just go right into the table of contents here, chapter 3. Every word, every picture, every bit of everything that's in the printed book is here online, and it's all free. And if your professor adopts a Flat World Knowledge book, you never have to pay any money, ever. You can use it online for free. Now you say, now how's that a business? Well, the way it's a business is because in addition to it being online for free, if you really want a print copy of it, but you just want a paperback, black and white kind of print copy, you can get that for 35 bucks. Or if you really want a hardback, full color copy, you can get that for 70 bucks. Or if you really want the audiobook copy you can throw on your iPod and listen to while you run or whatever, you can buy that. Or if you want the EPUB version for your iPad, you can buy that. So basically the model is the faculty member says, this is the book that we're using, and then every student says, okay, this is how much I want to pay for this book, and this is the way I want to use it. I want to use it in print, or on an iPad, or online, or on my iPod, or whatever. So when Jeff and Eric punched out of Pearson, they started asking around, we have this idea we want to do something with textbooks, but we want them to be open. And they started asking people they knew, how do we do that? And somebody they talked to said, oh, you know what, I've read this stuff by this guy, David Wiley, who's into open. You should talk to him. So really, my connection to Jeff and Eric came through another friend who knew about my work because I'd been really vocal in writing about and talking about all these ideas about openness in education. So Jeff and Eric got together, and then I joined kind of as the first outside person, playing kind of a CTO kind of role originally when there were 3 of us, which basically meant I spent my entire Christmas holiday one year building a mock version of the website because we were pitching investors in January. And once there was enough money to hire a real CTO, then I quit doing that and just became more of an advisor about how to do the open part of it correctly. And that's the role I'm in today. I'm kind of I think senior advisor is my title there. And I just help them get the open part of what they're doing right. But that whole connection, my whole opportunity to participate with them, to work with them for a while, to have a little equity in the company, all came because I'd been really vocal about the ideas I had. Somebody heard that and introduced me to them that way. So that I hope that that's a really concrete example of how sharing what you're thinking and sharing your ideas with people can lead to getting you drawn in. Third idea, there's a startup I'm working with right now called Degreed. I'm going to give you a little tour of this. Literally, about 1 year ago today, I was sitting in my office on campus, and there's a knock on the door, and I said, come in, and this guy walked in who I didn't know. And I said, have a seat, who are you, what's going on? And he said, well, I used to work with this company here in Provo. I helped get it started, and we sold it a couple months ago, and I'm looking for another, I've got this idea for a company I want to start now, and I've been trying to figure out who to do it with, and I read this thing on your blog, and I said, that's it. That's the kind of piece I was missing. I want to work with that guy in my startup. So I got on a plane. He lives in San Francisco. I got on a plane, and I flew out here, and here I am. I want to talk to you about working with me on a startup. I said, you didn't come to visit your mom or something? Really, you just flew out here on a whim? I said, not on a whim, because I read a bunch of the stuff that you wrote, and it made sense, and that's the kind of thing I want to do. And I said, okay. So what did I write that you read? What was it that you were thinking about? And the problem that Dave Blake was interested in was it's great if you come to college and you manage to get all the way through and graduate and get your degree. That's awesome, because every job description in the world for every posting that's available says BS in blah required, right? But Dave, for reasons of his own, had these thoughts and concerns about what about people that get 2/3 of the way through and then they have to drop out. They've learned a lot of the stuff that the business wants them to know, and they've got $30,000 of debt, but because they didn't get that one magic piece of paper at the end, they can't take those 3 years of experience and turn them into a job. So what do we do with those people? There's literally tens of millions of people in that category in the US. How do we help them take what they do know and turn it into a job, even though they, for whatever their life circumstance was, they weren't able to finish out and actually earn the full degree? So the idea with this company called Degreed is to help people take whatever experience it is that they've had, whether it's formal or informal. So if it's classes at a university, that's great, or classes at whatever, an after-school program or something like that, or if it's time that you spent, earning a certificate as opposed to a degree, or if you went online to one of these. Anybody heard of Udacity or Coursera or the term MOOC mean anything to anybody? One or two people? But let's deviate for just a second. We can't deviate when you didn't know what the plan was. It doesn't feel like a deviation, right? So Udacity, there it is real big. Udacity is a company started by a guy from Stanford who decided he thought it was too boring to teach 100 people at a time anymore, and he wanted to teach 100,000 people at a time. So he quit, and he started this company called Udacity. And the interesting thing about Udacity is that they have all these classes, and all of them are completely free for you to register for and completely free for you to take. And at the end, you can take the final completely for free, and they'll give you like a little badge that says, congratulations, you passed our class. Or if you need something a little more than a badge, you can go down to a testing center and take a proctored final exam. And they work with Pearson and other people that do provide this proctoring service. So you can pay $50 or something and walk in and take a final exam and actually get a paper that says, yes, you do know how to build a search engine because you passed our Intro to Computer Science class. It's completely free. It's completely free. And it's completely free. And the faculty, the founder is from Stanford, and there are other faculty from other places participating in it now. So say that you came and you took this class on computer science here, you took this Intro to Statistics or whatever, and you passed it, and you wanted to have some way to show that to a potential employer, that you had this experience, but it doesn't show up on your college transcript. So that's the problem that Degreed is trying to solve. Now, of course, it's terribly dangerous to ever try to demo anything live. And you can see the word beta scrawled across there. So basically, this is the way the model works right now, and I'd love to hear your feedback maybe after the talk. But when you log in, it goes out to Facebook and finds out the schools that you went to and asks you kind of what did you study. Well, my undergraduate degree is actually in music, as it turns out. And then it asks you, what did you get? Did you get a partial associate's, an associate's partial? Well, so I finished my bachelor's there. You can tell it your GPA if you want. I did my graduate work in education at the Y. I got a doctorate. And so now I'm going to hit this magic button. And if everything works the way it's supposed to work, then it's going to say, okay, here's you. It's pulled in my photo from Facebook and some other information about me. And it said, for a couple of categories like education and music and humanities, here's how much we think you know. And these lines coming down here are kind of rough equivalents to an associate's or a bachelor's or a master's degree. So this is a roll-up of what it thinks I know, and it's based that on the idea that at BYU, if I did a PhD in education, it means I took this many kinds of electives, a research design class, a teaching class, a theories of learning class. It's just made a guess at what my transcript looks like. But for any one of these courses, for this elective, I could say, actually, I can tell you exactly what that course was. Here's the course name and the number. I can put in more detail if I want. But there's my PhD in education, and now here's my music degree from Marshall. I had a form and analysis class of world music. It's just made a guess generically at what my transcript probably looks like, and I can go in and tell it specifically for any of them. But you'll see that for each of those courses kind of falls into a bucket, like a bunch of these courses here in music. If we go back to the degree side, to the roll-up, you'll see in music it's thinking that I know kind of this much relative to how much a person might know about music. But the interesting thing here is, say I've taken that course from Udacity on computer science. So in my, is that the right tab? I can say, well, actually, there's another group I've taken a class from, and that group is Udacity. And I can add them as a provider. And now if I roll all this up again, you'll see Udacity appears here as a provider. Now I can say, well, I took a course at Udacity, and the course that I took was this computer science course of some kind. The subcategory was in whatever, data structures and algorithms. I can add that to my transcript. And then if we go back to the degree roll-up, you'll see that it's actually, where did it show up? It must have pushed into math here. But so I can go around and I can have all these experiences, whether they're in a formal classroom or in an informal place like Udacity or a certificate program. And I can take all of those and put them in here and have them actually move a bar across and show an employer, here's the kinds of skills I have, and if you want to know specifically what it was I did, it's not just I have a BS in marketing. You can click down into my transcript, and I've provided detail here so you can see which classes I really took and how that really worked out. So that's degree. How are we doing? Okay, I want to tell one more story, and then we'll just go to kind of straight discussion. The last story I want to tell is about another startup I'm working with right now called Lumen. Lumen is kind of, in some ways, is taking the open high school model and moving it up into the community college space. So again, talking about sharing ideas and running into interesting people because you share ideas. I met this lady, Kim Thanos, from Portland several years ago because she was putting a conference together and she was looking for people to speak that knew something about a certain topic. So she was Googling around and asking her friends and whatever, and ran across some of the stuff I had written and asked some people she knew if they knew me. Anyway, we ended up working together in the context of this conference. And a couple of years later, we ended up working together again on some grant-funded research where we said, we didn't say this directly in the grant, but the logic essentially was, we've done this at the high school level, where we've taken these expensive curricula that districts or schools buy, and we've replaced those with open curricula and seen really good experiences for kids in terms of their learning. We think at the community college level, with young adults and with older adults, we can do the same kind of thing. So we started this project called Project Kaleidoscope, and you can see, these are the, this is the roll-up of the changes from the year before we started working with 8 community colleges across the country from New York to California. The blue is the percentage of students that received a C or better as their final grade in a certain course, and the yellow is in the year after. And you can see that there are some cases where, there's a little movement here, geography went down a little bit. But in some cases, like in intermediate algebra, the year before we worked with them, 22% of kids got a C or better in that class. The year after we worked with them, it was 74%. Now why? Well, who in here, if there are faculty in the room, you have to pretend that I didn't ask this question. Who has ever not bought a required textbook? You just looked at it and said, just not going to do it. Can't afford it, don't want it, they're not going to buy it back, whatever. It turns out about 40% of people at some point in their life, and not just one time, don't buy textbooks that are required because they're too expensive and they can't afford it. And if you're going to a community college, textbooks can be 30% of the total cost to go to school. 2/3 of its tuition, and the last full third is textbooks. So it really makes a big difference. So you've got people trying to take a class, trying to succeed in a class that don't have the book, can't read the homework, don't have the problems to do until their friend finishes. Turns out that when you make all of the material, all the text, all the problems, all the video available for free to every student from the very first day of class, it makes a huge difference. Right? One of my, another quote that I really love, this fellow Fred, what's your last name, Fred? Fred at Teachers Without Borders. Fred says that great minds are equally distributed around the world, but access to educational opportunity is not equally distributed. So there are people that are just budding geniuses waiting to turn into that who never do because they don't get the chance to take the classes or read the books that would help them develop that. Right? And it's not just true in places like Africa, it's true all over Utah. There are people who, if they could afford to get into school, if they could afford the textbooks, could just turn into incredible, even more incredible people than they already are and bless their own families and help other people and do incredible things. So the idea here, of course, so last year across 10 or 11 classes, we completely replaced the required textbooks with essentially open replacements, open textbooks. And the thing that's really exciting here now is that there's a couple community colleges we're working with. Hopefully we'll be able to announce by next fall a full associate's degree in general studies where there is $0 for required textbooks on all the syllabi for all the courses in the entire program. You can do your entire general studies associates without ever spending money on a textbook. And we think that's really super exciting. It takes some support and it takes some help for colleges to figure out how to do that. So you say, where's the business here? The business is in helping colleges find the materials that they need, help get the strategic alignment with the vision of the administration at the college, with this whole idea of not using textbooks and using free curriculum instead, supporting teachers, and there's plenty of work that needs to be done to support it. So there's a terrific business opportunity here too. And I want to share two more quotes just as a way to finish, and then we'll get to questions and answers. There's a fellow called Eric Raymond who wrote an essay back in 1998. Eric Raymond is the guy who made up the words open source. He helped coin the term. And he wrote this essay about open source, and it includes a number of rules. But the rule that I love the most, he says, every good work of software starts by scratching a developer's own personal itch. Right, so I'm doing my day job, and there's this thing that's really just causing me a lot of pain, and I decide I'm just going to stop and go fix it. And when you fix your own problem, you're actually fixing it for yourself, and you're the one who's going to use it. And when you're writing something for yourself, you write something really good quality. When you're writing an essay to turn in that your teacher's going to grade and then you're going to throw it away, it's kind of disposable homework. You don't invest that much in it. But when you're writing something for yourself, you do it with a different level of quality. So this idea that every good piece of work, and I don't think it's just software, every good piece of work starts by somebody scratching their own itch. It's a need that you have. So I'm a faculty member, so I teach classes, and it made me insane the first year or two that I taught how expensive textbooks were. So back in 02 or 03, I just said I'm never assigning another textbook to students again, period. I'm going to have to figure out how to pull together enough other stuff from on the web and other places so they can learn everything they needed to learn, but I'm not asking 100 people to go drop $200 on a textbook every semester when we get together. So, this whole body of work for me in some ways is about me scratching my own itch. The other quote that I wanted to show is from Jeff Bezos, who's the founder of Amazon. Last week, a couple weeks ago now, Amazon announced a whole bunch of new Kindles. And the price for there are Kindles now that are kind of comparable to iPads, and the iPad costs $4.99 and the Kindle costs $1.99. And people said, "Oh my gosh, you've got to be losing money on these Kindles. Why would you possibly sell them so cheaply?" And this is what Jeff said. He said, we want to make money when people use our devices, not when they buy them. If somebody buys a Kindle and puts it in a desk drawer and never uses it, we don't deserve to make any money. So we're willing to sell it really cheap in the beginning in hopes that it's such a good product, people will use it to buy books and use it to watch movies. And if it's a great product, they'll do all those things and we'll make money. If it's a bad product, they'll buy it, they'll look at it, they'll re-gift it to somebody else or throw it in a drawer. And if it's a bad product, we don't deserve to make any money. He says down here, he says, Amazon's mantra is align with customers. Win when they win, and win only when they win. And I think particularly in education, there's such a culture of people starting companies that sell curriculum, for example. So I'm going to write a new set of textbooks, and I'm going to come sell them to you. And at the end of the year, when your test results come back really bad, guess how much accountability I'm willing to take for your bad test results? 0. You cannot name a curriculum provider right now that will share accountability with a school. You can't find a curriculum provider who will say, we'll sell you our curriculum for this much, and then we're going to make this much money based on how many of your students actually pass the exam at the end, or based on student success. They just want to sell you some curriculum. They want to, in Jeff's kind of metaphor here, they want to take the Apple model. They're going to make all their money up front, but when they sell you the stuff, and then if you use it or don't use it, they don't care because they've made their money. But what we're trying to do in this model with Lumen, with this company that's supporting this idea of the no textbook associate's degree, is the curriculum's completely free. You can download it off the website. You can run your own no-cost associate's degree if you want to. But we think we can make it so much better. We think we can add so much value in that process and help so many more students succeed that you're going to be willing to pay us to help you do that. And if we can't, then you should never pay us. You should just take our free courses and go run them yourselves if you can do them better than we can help you do them. There's not a lot of that kind of put up or shut up mentality in education, and I really wish there were more of it. And I hope that we'll be able to be a good example in that way. So we've got a couple minutes left for questions. I know we did a couple of kind of questions and comments throughout, but let's just open it up. Yeah. the overwhelming, in fact, I think every single one of the open high school teachers, so they're all full-time, and I think every one of them works out of their home. There's an office, the open high school has an office in Salt Lake that's maybe a fourth the size of this half of this room. That's the school. And the teachers get together once a month for a faculty meeting and some PD and stuff like that, but they work from home. Yeah. How do they get paid? They're full-time teachers at a public school. They get paid like every other teacher gets paid. I guess I'm missing something in your question. Oh, so as a charter school, it's funded just like every other public school in the state of Utah. On October 1, you count heads, and how many heads are there on October 1? The state sends you money. Yeah. We are trying to figure out an intelligent way to attach student performance to teacher pay in some way, but that turns out to be a lot harder to do in a useful way than it sounds. Yeah. Do you know why people don't read the books they buy in college? It's because there's an unspoken agreement between faculty and students that goes like this. Hello students, welcome to class. There's a required book. You will all, of course, buy it. I have no idea what it costs, but that's okay. Buy it and read chapter 1, and I'll see you on Thursday. And on Thursday when I see you, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to lecture about chapter 1. Why are you going to read chapter 1 before you come to class if I'm going to stand up and lecture about chapter 1? That's a problem, right? I mean, I can remember several years ago when I started we didn't call it flipping the classroom back then, but first day of class, I stood up in front of all my students and said, you've got the materials, you didn't even have to pay for them because I pulled them all together from these free sources. I'm promising you right now, it should sound like a threat, although I'm couching it as a promise, I will never lecture in this class, period. You'll read the stuff before you come, and then when you come, I'll say, okay, what was confusing? What was interesting? What do you need to hear more about? And whatever you want to hear more about, I will talk more about. I'm not going to stand up and talk for 60 minutes, though. So I said that the first day of class, and they're like, they came back on Thursday, and I said, okay, I'm not lecturing today. What did you read that you want to know more about or that you didn't understand? And we had a silent staring contest for 3 minutes. And then I said, great, I'll see you next Tuesday. And I left. And then on Tuesday, when they came back, they weren't really sure. I mean, it's like a game of chicken, right, between me and the students. Like, am I really going to make them read on their own? College students have to read 30 pages? Like, it was mind-blowing, right? But I didn't back down. And by the time the semester ended, what was supposed to be like an hour and 15-minute class, we were regularly meeting for about 40 minutes. But I was true to my word. I never spoke unprovoked. I would only respond. And because we don't do that, people don't read. Because they know they're going to get 70% of it from the lecture anyway, so why read? And when you get 70% of it from the lecture, then you get a D or a C in the class. Because your total possible was only 70, and then how much of that did you actually remember? Well, 62%. Well, that's why success is such a problem when people don't have access to their materials. But so there's joint responsibility there too, on the faculty side and on the student side. A growing trend in what? Yes, there's a growing trend. Is it a positive trend is another question. I think what you'll almost always find is that games that are explicitly designed to support learning are not any fun to play. But you'll find teachers that take games that were designed to be fun to play and they will figure out how to use them in learning. So if you go, there's a lady in Wisconsin. Her website is just constances.org. She studies video games. One of the video games that she's studied people using is Civilization. I don't know if you're familiar with Civilization, right? So you're trying to conquer other civilizations, whatever. And I can't remember which of the papers, but I've read in some of the work that she's done, asking students like essay questions at the end of term, students in history who played Civilization and students in history who didn't play Civilization. Like when you ask them causal questions like what caused this to happen, the students who played the game will say things like, well, if you don't occupy the territory that's rich in natural resources right away, then like you don't have metal. You can't develop technology. Like all these things that they learned by playing the game, which the game's just a fun game to play. But the game's written in a way that's kind of historically authentic. And so they learned these lessons even though they didn't realize they're learning them, but you have to guide that and pull it out, help them make those lessons explicit, kind of like Mr. Miyagi back in the original Karate Kid. Or like Daniel's like, why am I waxing the car? Why am I painting the fence? I don't get it. And then when Mr. Miyagi attacks him, he starts blocking his punches. He realizes all the stuff he's been doing is actually valuable. Too much of what we do is the Mr. Miyagi model, like just trust me and wax my car. I promise you're learning something valuable and you'll figure it out later on. We've got to do a better job of making those connections explicit. And Constance's work does a great job of showing that with video games, how to draw those connections and really make them clear and make them valuable. I think we're over time. Yeah, I'm sorry. I went a minute or two long.